And good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops
Woohoo!
HD, our Hoops HD report. We have about 15 different names for this show over the years, but this is
Another
our Hoops HD
Chad's
report.
off to another great start.
As always, starting off strong. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. Off to one side of me over here is David Griggs. The other side, John Stalika. Down below, John Titel and Matt Sikowski. We're here to discuss anything and everything that's happened in college sports in the last week, or the whole season so far, honestly, as well as preview what we're looking for ahead. And before we go into any of that, though, David, I actually want to start by addressing something to you here. For those of you that have been following the website, every week we post a bracket, and early in the season, it's basically a merit-based bracket that David does that really makes no sense. It has teams like Wagner as one seeds and the like, and it's honestly, I think it's a waste of time, but he likes to do it for some reason. But I'm going to pull up on my screen right here
Chad, Chad. No, well,
this is David's bracket from today, if you all can see this here. And I just wanted to pull this up just to bring everyone's attention to it.
Chad, what are you doing?
I think this is hacked because I don't see Nebraska anywhere in this field.
Well, yeah, there's that.
Well,
Yes.
I wanted to bring up a couple minor things first of all. There's some crazy things here. Like, if David, you say this is a merit-based bracket, correct?
Well, yes, based
Okay.
on how much merit I think they deserve.
Okay.
And this is a
Oregon-
prime example why I should just be in charge of all of this.
I want to circle through things here. Oregon and Pittsburgh is 6 seeds, while Arizona is a 10 seed. David, you want to explain that to me? Explain what Pittsburgh has done that's so much better than what Arizona has done so far.
Well, I mean, they've won some neutral floor games. I think they've
You
just
can't,
have the
can
one.
you?
Well, it's just. I just want to say
What is
that
that?
we have interns that oversee this, and Kyle Lamb is in charge of our internship program, and I am very disappointed in the work this week.
Well, I will tell you what, though, David, that is not the worst thing here. I want to bring everybody to the Midwest region, the 12 seed here, TCU.
What's
I
wrong?
want to
with
bring everyone
TCU?
down here to the West region, the 12 seed. David, is this a new rule here? How much do you like TCU?
Well, it's just. I mean, it would be. I hate you, Chad. I just want to say that we were supposed to have interns that were overseeing this, and you were supposed to be editing this, Chad. Why did you do this?
I also want to put out here, if you are going to put TCU in twice, you've got to follow the bracketing rules. One of their sites has to be a Friday, Sunday site. You cannot expect a team to play 2 different sites on the same day. At least 2 different days, David.
Well, they're going to send their A team and their B team, just like spring training in baseball, right?
It is 2016, Chad. I mean, did you ever think about that?
Well, it will be 2017.
Yeah.
Well, it will be. Yeah, let's go. I'm going to pull that down here. Let's move on to the
So
actual
there were a
game.
few minor oversights last night when I was putting this together.
And how drunk were you?
Not very. I mean, no more drunk than normal.
Okay, let's actually get into the games, though, that happened this past week. And we're going to start with the big series we discussed. We previewed them last week. Was the
Chad, when you're
Big Ten
editing the
Challenge.
bracket, you have to be more careful than that. I mean, you can't let that go like that.
ACC Big Ten Challenge, where actually after the first 2 days of the challenge, it was tied 4-4, and the ACC won 5 out of the last 6 games to take a 9-5 victory in the challenge. John S., let me start with you here. On the first day, we saw the Syracuse-Wisconsin game with Wisconsin looking pretty good in that game.
I think you were talking about the second day, because if you're talking about the first day, we have to go into Florida State's comeback victory over Minnesota.
You're right. I skipped those 2 games. I apologize
Oh,
to
wow,
all those
now who's
Minnesota
messing
fans. But yeah, we did. Florida State beat Minnesota. Northwestern beat Wake on the first day. But I wanted to focus in on both the Wisconsin win over Syracuse and the Pitt win over Maryland to begin with on day 2. John S.
Well, the win for Wisconsin came at a good time because they're already coming off of, losses to Creighton and also to North Carolina in the Maui Invitational. I mean, nothing to be ashamed about, but for a team that had their sights set on a protected seed, that was one where they had to hold serve, and also avenging Oklahoma a few days later also helped. But maybe this is the game where the puppet was so wowed by Pittsburgh going into Maryland, he doesn't give Virginia Tech any credit for going to Michigan.
Gave them credit for going to Michigan.
Not enough credit.
Let me go over to you, Matt.
I just want to say that John Teitel and I, what we're doing is way more accurate than what you all are doing.
Matt, let me turn over to you here. Also on the Tuesday games, the second day, as Stalika has corrected me, we saw Duke with a very nice home win over Michigan State, as well as Illinois picking up a home win over NC State.
That's what Illinois started showing a little bit of a pulse where it looked like they're on their way to maybe like a 14-17 season. It started a fairly big week for them and maybe for the program, and hell, it might be for John Gross's job by first beating a talented NC State team. They're still a little shorthanded. And, of course, probably away from home in November, you should have expected them to win that game. But that's nice. And then, yeah, Michigan State kept it pretty competitive versus Duke, but in the end, Duke just had a little too much firepower and pulled away.
And John T., you got a chance to see this Michigan team earlier this year live. And on the third day of the challenge, they lose to Virginia Tech. Were you surprised by that game?
I was. I really was buying Michigan very high. I really thought they were the best team. They were the best team I saw at the Garden, and I really thought that they were going to keep pouring it on by making threes, playing the 1-3-1 zone under Coach Beilein, returning all the senior leadership, and they can still score. It's just the threes are not always falling. I think they were 10 of 27 against Virginia Tech. Solid, just not as good as Virginia Tech's 43% shooting, 6 of 14. And the free throws were the big difference in the game. Michigan only took 7 free throws, making 4. Virginia Tech, amazing, 19 of 21 at the line. That's how you win games.
Yeah, it is. And David, another game here. That first day we saw Louisville with a 7-point home win over Purdue. After Purdue had looked pretty good before then, is that a game that surprised you at all?
Not really. I mean, it's really hard to win at Louisville. They're really good. I don't think there's anything discouraging about Purdue. It really doesn't change my opinion of them at all. I mean, am I surprised that Louisville won at home? No.
Well, heading into, I think last week I actually called Ohio State to beat Virginia. I was not quite right. Virginia pulled out a 2-point victory after trailing most of the game. Matt, I think you may have been kind of on my Ohio State bandwagon with me. Did you take anything out, even despite the loss, that maybe Ohio State really is a tournament team this year?
Yeah, I think that performance that might get lessened a little bit by what West Virginia did a couple days later, but still I think a good performance in Charlottesville. Place you generally don't go and win, and they almost came out with the win there. And yeah, I think I started viewing them as a tournament team again, where I've already been on the roller coaster where I liked them preseason, didn't love some of their early season performances, but now was very impressed with that. And now I think they're on the line, maybe like an 8-9 seed type team this year.
And Stalika, we also saw probably the game of the event. It was the final game of the event. Indiana with the huge home win over North Carolina, more than making up for the loss to Fort Wayne. How good is this Indiana team after beating Carolina that way?
Well, they're good enough that we can overlook a little boo-boo at Fort Wayne, but if you saw the end of the game, Isaiah Thomas was also in the house with a crying Jordan head.
Okay. John T., as far as this entire challenge here went, was there anything that you took away from this in terms of the ACC and the Big Ten overall?
So we take away a couple of things. Number one, the ACC is back. They had won it for 10 years in a row, from 99 to 08, then lost it ever since 08, and then finally won it this week. As David said, it's hard to go into Louisville. Like, the home teams went 12-2, so it's hard to go into anywhere and win. One other takeaway I have is Notre Dame seems to be for real. They were the only team to score 90-plus points, despite losing some key seniors to the NBA last year. I was very impressed by the Irish.
I was impressed by the Irish, but I also think they had a matchup with Iowa, and I do not like this Iowa team one drop from what I've seen this year. So we're going to get a few better tests coming up very soon for this Notre Dame team, so we're going to learn a lot more about them in the next couple of weeks here. David, any other thoughts from you on the challenge overall?
Yeah, I mean, the showcase games were what they were, highly ranked teams, protected seed caliber teams, and those are big wins. But I don't really think those are the same. They don't have the same pivotal feel as some of the other games. I thought some of the biggest winners in this were Virginia Tech getting the win at Michigan. I mean, to me, to get an out-of-conference win like that basically cements and demonstrates that they are a tournament caliber team. Big win there. And in a team that is passing the eye test, they don't quite have the paper yet, but they lost a close one away from home against a very good Butler team, lost another close one away from home against a very good Notre Dame team, and they have looked really good at home. I know that we say this every year, and I'm going to say it again. I think Northwestern can get to the tournament this year.
Here's where the puppet is even more insane as it relates to Pittsburgh. Yes, they had a very nice win at Maryland, but look what they did a few nights later. They hosted Duquesne in the city game.
No, they didn't host
First time in 16 years. Lost to the Mighty Dukes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to. I mean, so they're 1-15. You just got to.
Okay. I want to very briefly touch on the was another challenge series that actually 9 out of the 10 games were played this weekend between the Mountain West and the Missouri Valley Conference. Not quite the level of the ACC Big Ten. The Missouri Valley won 5 out of the 9 games that were played on Saturday. The 10th game won't be until December 19th when Southern Illinois goes to UNLV. John T., we did see Wichita State go into Colorado State and pick up a win, and probably the most notable game of that series. The other thing of note, I guess, was San Diego State losing at Loyola of Chicago.
I think the second one is the more of note. When
really?
you have a championship caliber coach like Steve Fisher, you're not supposed to lose any team in Chicago, much less Loyola. I mean, maybe Northwestern, but.
But David, you would kind of like this Colorado State team a little bit, for at least for Mountain West standards. If Wichita State to go in there and win that game, I was really impressed with that.
I thought up until now, which isn't a lot. I mean, the vast majority of the season is in front of us, not behind us. I thought it was their most impressive win, and I do think it's a win they're going to get quite a bit of credit for. Colorado State, they came off a win against what we think is a good Colorado team, and they beat them in Colorado. They hadn't really lost this year. They were looking really good, and chances are they're not going to lose many games at home. That might be one of only 1 or 2 losses. So I think Wichita State, while Colorado State doesn't have the brand name that jumps out and excites you, I do think they're going to get a lot of credit for that win. And when we look at the Mountain West, who really has looked – Colorado State's looked as good as just about anyone else. I wouldn't be surprised if they come out on top of that league. That's not saying a lot. The bar that they have to make it over is kind of sitting on the floor, as weak as the Mountain West is, but they've looked as good as anybody that I've seen in that league.
Matt, turning away from the Challenge Series, I'd like to very briefly touch on Iowa State here. This is a team, maybe as hard luck of a team as we've seen so far. Their last 2 games, first of all, the championship game of, I believe it was the Advocare losing to Gonzaga, and then to follow that up with, on Thursday night, a 55-54 home loss in overtime to Cincinnati.
Yeah, actually, I want to look at the other team in that game a little bit. Cincinnati, I think that's a huge win for them. I thought they actually were going to go and win. They pulled it out. Those are the games they were losing last year. And this year, I think with even less of a margin as the American, does not look good at all. That's a big win for them that might carry some weight to where if they drop a questionable road game in the American or 2, their profile could probably maybe now survive it to where they'll have at-large credentials.
Right, and the Cincinnati team, I believe they did crack into the top 25 this week coming off of that win. I believe it's been about 3.5 years since Iowa State lost a non-conference game at home. So really nice performance there by Cincinnati. David, we touched on it briefly earlier. John Stalika mentioned it, but Pittsburgh, again, who you ranked as a 6th seed in your field. You were right. It was not a home game. It was technically a neutral court game at the arena there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can't –
loses to Duquesne for the first time since, I believe, they invented sliced bread.
About that, yes. It's been a minute. It's been a little bit. what is it, 16, 17 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
The thing is, it's not unusual to see Duquesne compete in this game. We've seen games go to overtime. We've seen Duquesne right in there at the end, and, they finally get it over the top. That's got to be one of the most feel-good wins in a real long time for Duquesne. And, it comes off of, after having just won at Maryland, a really nice win for them. And that's kind of what you got to that's the win at Maryland's kind of nice, isn't it? For them to be on the 6th.
Yeah, where did you put Maryland in your field?
I don't remember.
Okay. John T., over the weekend we saw some great games. I think we had like 3 or 4 top 25 or top 20 matchups on Saturday. The highlight game, UCLA going into Kentucky and winning. Are we all on the Steve Alford bandwagon now?
True. Quick Duquesne pit note before we just gloss over it. Starting guard Jamel Artis was suspended for that game for a team violation, and frankly, I know it's hypothetical. I don't think they lose if he's playing.
Yeah, and you got to factor that in. Thank you, John. Thank you.
You're welcome. Moving on to UCLA Kentucky, amazing game by the Bruins. I really think UCLA is a legit team. I really worry about a couple things, though. Number one, the defense. They gave up, I believe, 92 to a young Kentucky team, albeit a number 1 ranked team in their home court on Rupp Arena. Number two, there's not a lot of depth on that bench for the Bruins. Alford goes about 7 deep, maybe 8. And obviously it hasn't hurt him yet because those 8 guys can score 100 points a game in hostile territory. The freshmen Lonzo Ball and TJ Leaf are playing like 5th-year seniors. I think it's going to bite him eventually because I want to put this team in the Final Four. I just can't. You need better defense and better depth in March.
I think if you go back to the tape from last week, wasn't John Calipari saying, well, we need to be in a close game? Be careful what you wish for.
Well, John, I'm not going to quite agree with you. I don't think this was that close of a game. It was not that 1 or 2 possession game down the way. I think UCLA really dominated most of this game. So I don't think he's had that close game that he really wanted, even though it was a 5-point final.
I was astounded. I really was.
I didn't get to see that game, but we'll get into why a little bit later.
I've been huge on UCLA all year, and I was just astounded that I was once again right about that.
Okay. We won't go there.
I had not, even at halftime, I was still not believing. I believe in them now. That was a remarkable win, all kidding aside. That might be the most impressive road win that anyone gets all year, all season long. That was tremendous.
Another one of the big games we had on Saturday, Matt, you mentioned it already briefly, was this West Virginia over Virginia game. Are we serious about Bob Huggins' team this year now?
I am now. I wasn't all that high on them going into the year. I had them, I think, in one of the play-in games, and now I would be shocked if they weren't that way, unless Virginia totally implodes, which I don't see happening. But it was, I will say, kind of a double opinion change here in that I think a fair amount higher in West Virginia. Now, this was kind of a leaky week for Virginia to where I thought going into this week, I viewed them as like a 1-seed caliber team. Now I'm thinking maybe 4 or 5 seed. Still pretty good, but man, even though he was a flake and probably did something deserved to get kicked off the team, I think they're missing Austin Nichols. That's a piece they don't have. I don't think you can't replace that in season. It's hard enough to do it, say, and he flaked out last spring, and you maybe could have gone into recruiting someone in season. You can't replace that. And Jack Stahl, Jared Ryder, and that not bad players. Bobby Diakite, I think, is going to be very good, but probably not ready yet. And therefore, I think they're just a little weaker on the front line. It's just not the caliber team we thought even a week ago.
Well, John T., if you look at West Virginia, though, some of the power rating numbers, Ken Pom has them number 9 in the nation with a top 15 adjusted offense and adjusted defense. They only have that one loss to Temple, and are we almost going to write off that loss as one of those fluke games? It was a second game in 2 days, that type of thing? Or
we are not going to write off the loss. Temple is legit because they followed that win, or they preceded the win over West Virginia by beating Florida State, and then the following week they beat St. Joe's, a tourney team from last year. Somehow they got by the Quakers, albeit by 8 points. West Virginia's for real, as is Temple. the thing I like about the Mountaineers is that they get to coast into conference play. Their next 5, Western Carolina, VMI, UMKC, Radford, and Northern Kentucky. There are no top 200 teams on that list. They're going to have a very nice winter break in Morgantown.
They're going to have a nice winter break, but David, are we going to have some problems with their strength of schedule at the end of the day with that coming up? Because other than this win at Virginia, a neutral court win over Illinois, and that's going to be it.
Out of conference, that's it. I mean, they'll certainly get their opportunities in conference. And again, I think that it's okay to have a cupcake. It's okay to have a dessert. But when you have this many, I think it does more harm than good. But having said that, I don't think it's going to do so much harm that it completely drags them down.
Okay. And it is fair that they are in the Big 12, and that will help a lot.
Right. But, yeah, I mean, again, this isn't something that we normally see out of West Virginia or any team Bob Huggins has ever coached. I'm a little shocked that they would put together – Northern Kentucky makes sense. He had ties there. I believe that was a 4-year series, home and home. But some of those other games, I don't know why they scheduled them. That isn't how they normally schedule, at least not this many.
Well, John Salika, let me turn to another game. And you mentioned the fact that you were not able to watch the UCLA-Kentucky game. You were actually on site down in Waco, Texas. Can you give us a report of that Baylor-Xavier game?
No, it started out fairly even. Xavier had a slight edge at halftime because they were dominating the boards and hitting just enough from outside. But thanks to a player we haven't really covered from Baylor named Manu LeConte, who had transferred from Miami, he keyed up with Jonathan Motley, and Baylor actually pulled away in the second half and got a pretty nice win, and adds to what, based on merit, would probably be the number 1 overall ranking at this point.
Well, if we look at the power numbers, KenPom has them 11 overall, which I think is low. I think they're up to number 4 in the nation in the polls today, though. John T., how good is this Baylor team? I think I asked you this last week also, and they just keep impressing me. I don't know.
They are, and I'm going to repeat what I said last week because we were talking about how Tom Izzo was apologizing to his players for playing such a tough schedule. Scott Drew, his players should thank him. Oregon, Florida Gulf Coast, VCU, Michigan State, Louisville, and Xavier. 6 of their 8 wins are great teams, and they won, not all at home, 3 of them neutral site wins, and that's how the reward works. You win against good teams, you go up high in the ranks, and then you get to wear white in March. Like, thank you, Scott Drew, for scheduling these great teams and then going out and beating them.
Well,
like a handful of teams, that also gives them a break going into their final exam week.
Matt, I would say the one negative, if I have to find one on Baylor's schedule anywhere, is that they have not actually played a true road game yet. They won't do that until conference play, and they step out of conference at the end of January to go to Ole Miss. Do you think that could affect them when they start having to go to places like Kansas and West Virginia and the like?
It might their first game in that. I don't think it will be a long-term thing. And I think, like, for resume purposes, maybe like a 1 spot on the S-curve difference, say like from 4 to 5, 8 to 9. Maybe that hurts, but I don't think it'll be a big thing for the resume. And overall, that quality of win will make up for the fact that none of them were a true road game. Because I think they'll get a couple of those in the Big 12. There's enough chances. I mean, all 10 teams, I think, are like the top 70 in KenPom right now.
Yeah. David, another team that went 0-2 out of the top 25 this past week was the Rhode Island Rams out of the Atlantic 10. First losing to Valpo and then losing in their rivalry game to Providence. Is there cause concern for URI at this point?
Concern, yes, but hardly panic. I mean, they're still good enough to get done what they need to get done to get inside the bubble. It's not. I mean, they should have won one of those games, and they could have won both of them. It's not like they got blown out or it looked like they didn't belong there. But I mean, it's. I don't think there's reason to panic yet. It's not easy to win at Valpo, and it's not easy to win at Providence this year. Providence looking a lot better than what at least I expected them to be. And I don't know, maybe someday they'll finally beat them again.
John,
love that game, by the way, or I do. In the last 3-4 years, that game's been hugely exciting.
John T., I have one other game from this past weekend that we got to discuss, and I know you don't want to, but the Zags and the Wildcats. What did you take away from Gonzaga's win here?
A couple things. So first of all, I decided to reward myself on Cyber Monday by doing a little shopping like every good American does. And I need a few more dollars on Amazon to qualify for free shipping. Look what this genius decided to get.
All right. There you go.
Thanks for the $5 golf towel, Amazon. Secondly, Arizona kept it close. They outscored them in the last 10 minutes of the game, 22-16. They cut it, I believe, to 5 points at the Staples Center. They just couldn't get it done. Karnowski was unstoppable. 18 points on 9 of 13 shooting. They threw Comanche at him. They threw Ristic. They tried to throw Markkanen, even though he probably weighs like 50 pounds less. Could not stop him. They're also like running out of bodies. I mean, Alonzo Trier is still ineligible. Every Wildcat fan has these wild theories about why. I'm dying to know if they ever announce it. And now our 5'7" point guard, Parker Jackson Cartwright, goes out with a sprained ankle. I've heard he's going to be out several weeks. We're just running out of bodies. When we're healthy, I like our chances. We're running out of people.
Matt, you were huge on the West Coast Conference heading into the season. I laughed at you when you said you could have 2 protected seats in this league. I'm not laughing anymore. This Gonzaga team, I think, is showing with the Iowa State win, with the Arizona win. When do they lose a game? Do they lose a game?
I think they'll lose at least once or even maybe a couple of times in conference. And even they'll seem kind of laughable, but Washington on Wednesday, you wouldn't expect them to lose. You probably expect them to win by double digits. But say Markelle Fultz goes crazy and a couple other guys get hot from the perimeter. It's one of those you wouldn't expect, but could be. And then maybe off the high of that Arizona when maybe Gonzaga has a little bit of a letdown. But still, they're not going to lose too often this year. And I think probably in the end, I said at the beginning of the year, 2 seed in the West. I'm sticking with 2 seed in the West.
I'm excited to see Mark Few and Lorenzo Romar renew their well-documented long-time friendship.
Okay, Stalika. This evening, right before we started recording, we started this a little after 9 on Monday evening. We just saw Syracuse and UConn at Madison Square Garden, a little Big East throwback game here. Really, really high intensity, high scoring, good played basketball game. What do you think?
Reminiscent of Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, and UConn certainly tried to give the game away at the end, but Syracuse wouldn't accept it.
David, how do you miss that many free throws and win a game? I could not figure it out.
You play against Syracuse. I find it funny that Syracuse has decided to keep their rivals on the schedule, UConn and Georgetown, and more often than not, those teams have been terrible. So Syracuse's out-of-conference strength of schedule hasn't really improved much. As you know, I was at the game here in New York City, coming to you live from the green room here. And, I don't know, just a sloppy all-around performance, but still exciting. One of the few feel-good moments that UConn will have this year.
Well, yes, and David, good job there on checking in from the New York City. But
well,
I could have sworn I saw him outside Rockefeller Center at the Christmas tree lighting a few minutes ago.
Well, I was asked to leave for some stupid reason, and then when I didn't, I was forced to leave. But I was there.
John T., I want to head back to Sunday, actually. You had a chance to catch the BB&T Classic in person, I believe, with the Georgetown's win of sorts over Elon.
It was of sorts. So the first game was the Hoyas hosting Elon, and it was close throughout. Elon came in, I believe, as the number 20 scoring team in the nation, about 80-plus points a game. And Georgetown held them to the low 70s. So a lot of credit has to go to Georgetown's defense, both on the perimeter as well as close to the hoop. Coach Matheny of Elon mentioned when I asked him after the game about it, because they came in, Elon shooting a ton of free throws. They only had about 7 or 8 in the game. And he said, they're big in the middle. We couldn't do anything. That being said, they were 3 points away from tying the game and sending it to overtime. The second game was GW hosting the mighty Seminoles, and Florida State looked so good.
Yes.
Despite not having Jonathan Isaac, they're like McDonald's All-American super frosh. He was out with a strained hip flexor, I found out after the game from Coach Hamilton, but they did not skip a beat. They were up 30 midway through the second half, and it became a laugher. One of the bigger gentlemen I've ever seen in my life, Chris Kumaje for Florida State, 7'4" out of Nigeria, and all they do is throw him alley-oops and let him block shots. He's good at both of those things.
Yeah, like when the margin got to 28, it dawned on me that all of the people that left were missing a horrible game.
Let's move on to a couple of things. Actually, David, let me stick with you. One other game that did get played this weekend, Louisville Cardinals went out to Arizona and played at Grand Canyon on their home court in an absolutely amazing atmosphere there, as they always have at Grand Canyon, maybe even more so. I believe they did set the record for attendance. I think there were people hanging from the rafters that game.
Yeah.
Louisville picked up the win, but I think you wanted to discuss this a little bit.
Well, yeah, not just this game specifically, but games like that. We don't see many of them. We've seen 2 this year, Indiana going to Fort Wayne, similar situation, you know, a big, rare showcase game for that program. And then Grand Canyon getting Louisville. It's interesting Louisville went there. Louisville likes to go to the bakery out of conference. We see them play more bye games than what even most power conference teams play. So it's odd that they would decide to play this one. Up and coming program that's really good at home. But what an atmosphere. And one of the things I cannot stand is the reason teams don't like to schedule these is because they say they have everything to lose and nothing to gain. Well, what did Indiana lose? They lost the game, but they didn't lose everything. And look at Louisville going out there, getting the win. They got so much more out of that experience, and it meant more on and off paper than playing some Northern Kentucky at home would have done. Rick Pitino said that he felt like it made his team better. So with games like this, be it Indiana at Fort Wayne or Louisville at Grand Canyon, I think they're good for the sport. They're certainly good for the under-the-radar team and their fans that get to host a game like that. But I submit that it is good for the power alpha program like Louisville, like Indiana. I think they got way more out of it than what they would have gotten out of any bye game, even though Indiana lost the game. And I think it made both teams better. And like you said on the chat thread that we have, why don't we see more of these?
I agree with you. And at the end of the day, Grand Canyon's probably be close to a top 100 team. It's going to be a solid road victory over a top 100 team. Maybe it's going to be a 110 team, but it's going to be very close to that. And I think that is going to carry some weight at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And whereas if a win over a team rated 100 to 110, that range at home is going to be But on the road, I think – I know, David, you're huge on road wins for whether teams belong in the tournament or not, but I think it will – we'll see how much weight it will carry at the end of the day when we look at their profile come March. But
it was a fun game to watch. Both of them were.
It's real fun to watch those games at Grand Canyon, and I love watching on TV because they like to put my tweets on the bottom of the screen too. So, and I was on there if you look. But let's turn now to. I want to run through some of the teams of these major conferences. If you remember last week, we went through everybody that was left that was undefeated that had not made the tournament last year. We kind of asked the fraud or for real question. I want to turn to some of these teams, maybe not necessarily undefeated, maybe 1 loss or 2 loss, but real strong records in the 6 top conferences, and go through each of you here and find out if you think these teams are for real or not, based on what you've seen so far. And let's start off in the ACC. John Titel, you just spoke about them a little bit. This Florida State team, are you sold on them? Are they for real this year?
They are. They go into the NIT champions' backyard without their super frosh and destroy them. Their only loss all year, 3 points neutral site to a good Temple team with a great coach in Fran Dunphy. The schedule so far has been a little blah, but they beat Illinois. They beat Minnesota. They have a couple cupcakes coming up, and then a huge game against Florida on Sunday the 11th, and then a couple other cupcakes before starting ACC play. If they can get by Florida, they are real. Even if they don't, I still think they can win 20. I know the ACC is tough, and Isaac better be healthy because they're not doing anything without him, but I'm a believer in the Seminoles.
Matt, how about Virginia Tech with that win in Michigan? Are you a believer in them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think this is basically a tailor-made Buzz roster. He gets Kerry Blackshear back in February, and they'll have depth all over. Because I think Kadeem Sai's done a nice job for a fairly raw freshman, coming in, getting 15, 20 minutes a game, and then otherwise letting Buzz go small ball with Lede at the 5, Chris Clark at the 4. But yeah, and then he got Ahmed Hill back after redshirt year last year. Looks like he improved his game at the time he sat out. Very good shooter. Justin Robinson, a good heady point guard, kind of like a better version of Junior Cadogan as a Marquette point guard. Probably better, a little more athletic, but at the same time a heady floor general that hits just enough shots. And that's it. I think I wouldn't be surprised if they face top 5 in the ACC. I think this is a really nice team. Buzz has them on the upswing. And they look like Buzz's good Marquette teams and not his last one.
Lord, what is
Stalika? Here's a team that some of us like, some didn't like. They're 6-2 right now. The Miami Hurricanes. Do you think, from what you've seen so far, this team is legitimate or not?
They're not a fraud, but I think it's still too soon to say as to whether or not they're going to be able to crack into the NCAA tournament field. I mean, they did hold off a resilient Rutgers team as far as the ACC and Big Ten challenge goes.
Yeah, we let that one slip through a little bit there, but Rutgers only lost in the season. David, how about the North Carolina State Wolfpack?
I'm not sold on them. I mean, at least not yet. I don't know if I'm going to call them a fraud, but I'm not to the point of saying that I think they're there for real yet.
One other team in the ACC, I guess, John T., let me throw this back to you. The Clemson Tigers were a team that a lot of you liked heading in. Losses to Xavier in Oklahoma. They've won the rest of their games. Are they for real or are they a fraud, or is it too early to tell?
Too early. I mean, they beat Nebraska, so they have to be somewhat real, of course.
Yes.
A loss to Xavier by 6 at neutral site, followed by a loss to Oklahoma by 6 at a neutral site, means that you're right in the middle. They beat Georgia and Davidson. They have they're playing the rest of the SEC with Alabama and South Carolina back-to-back on the road in December. Nice scheduling there, Coach Brownell. So we will see in the weeks ahead if they are for real or not. I think it's too early, though.
Did I just see an intern creeping into the puppet screen there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones that messed up everything.
Well, that must be who did it.
Northern Arizona, and have you seen their cheerleaders? And if so, what the hell is going on? Anyway, moving on. They're dressed in
Pat, your team, the Marquette Golden Eagles over in the Big East, nice win at Georgia over the weekend.
Well, this ought to be subjective. This ought to be an objective.
Well, let me go with you first, then I'm going to then I'll have David's response to you. Let's do it that way.
That's what I think about what I thought going into the year, where I think pretty solid number 30 at Ken Pop. I think that's a fairly accurate representation to where I think in the end, probably right around an 8-9 game, maybe against Ohio State, which I mentioned, say in the 8-9 game. And maybe there'll be better results on the home and home from a few years ago. But I think it's like very good offensive team, shoots it well, doesn't turn it over. Maybe one slight negative, they don't get to the line a ton. It's a shame, too, because they're over 80% from the line as a team. But, yeah, like really good offensive team. And not great defensively, but adequate enough that I think it'll be enough to get them to the tournament.
David, do you want to respond?
In actuality, I like them. I don't know if I like them enough to say that they're a slam dunk first ballot NCAA tournament team, but they've really only looked bad in one game, and I thought they looked pretty good in their last game out at Georgia, not the easiest place to win. Nice road win for them there. Looked really good against Vanderbilt to open the year. They've looked good. You know, what have they played 7-8 games, and they've looked good in all but one of them.
Stalika, Seton Hall Pirates with 2 losses, Florida and Stanford. Do we know enough yet?
I was set to give Seton Hall some credit for beating Iowa, but that one seems to be getting less and less significant by the day. I mean, they really could have used a win against either Florida or Stanford down in Orlando. I mean, they've still got a lot of work to go, but I'm not going to give them the F for fraud just yet.
No F for fraud just yet. And John T., how about these Providence Friars? David liked them a little bit from what we heard earlier. Do you think this team is actually legitimate this year?
Again, too early. They lost to Ohio State by 5 on the road and Virginia at neutral site by double digits, who are 2 solid teams. A lot of cupcakes. Grambling and St. Francis are 300 and below teams. Rhode Island win by 3 at home. Great, but they have a bunch of cupcakes coming up. we'll see when they have Xavier and at Butler to finish 2016 and start 2017. But I think too early.
Too early. Okay.
I'm not expecting them to win either of those, but I thought this would be a bottom Big East team. I mean, in 9th, 10th range, and they're certainly better than that. So part of the reason I probably think they're good is that they're just so much better than what I initially thought they'd be.
I believe Memphis is the only team that they've beaten away from the friendly confines of Providence.
Yeah, it is.
Well, now we know in the Big Ten that over in the Big Ten where Rutgers with only one loss is powerful victories over the likes of Malloy, North Texas, and Niagara. So we don't have to need to discuss their power this season. But Matt,
Don't forget Hartford.
Yes, a nice win over Hartford by 2 points. Very good job by Rutgers against a very bad Hartford team. But Matt, how about Minnesota and little Rick Pitino's team there? 7-1 so far on the year.
And they just beat at least okay-ish Vandy team on a neutral court. And they beat the crazy St. Johnnies, who are probably not good, but on their day could have it. They beat them in the Gavin games. I think decent enough. You might say NIT team, which is well ahead of where I had them coming into the year. So, and I mean they're right around 50 at KenPom, so that's borderline tournament caliber. Just off that, I think they'll fall a little from that, but yeah, like I said, they might just be an NIT team.
Yeah,
And
David,
they've also beaten Arkansas and Texas Arlington.
they have, and David, they've got NJIT, Georgia Southern, Northern Illinois, LIU, Brooklyn coming up, non-conference. Chance for Pitino's team to pick up a lot of wins, if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, they're picking up a lot of wins, but at the end of the day, do those indicate that they're for real or not? I mean, all they're really going to prove is that they're capable of winning home bye games, and I don't think we ever thought them incapable of that. Arkansas State actually has a pulse, but still, they probably picked that one up as well. I'm not with them. I think that they're a fraud, but they'll be a fraud with a very bloated record going into Big Ten play.
John T., a team in your backyard there, the Maryland Terrapins, coming off a win over Oklahoma State by 1 point over the weekend. For real or for fraud with only one loss?
Man, I think I'm going to have to go fraud, which is it seems impossible for 8-1 with only lost to a good ACC team. I saw the opener against American on their home court. They were lucky to win by 6. I saw the game on my birthday against Georgetown at the Verizon Center. I still can't believe they won by 1 because they had given up that game, and then Georgetown somehow became impossible to either inbound the ball and or advance the ball without turning it over. They should have started the season 0-2. Kansas State win by 1, neutral site, nice. Oklahoma State win by 1, very good. And 4 cupcakes, so they could be 12-1 starting ACC play. Big Ten play. I hate when that happens.
And you want to know one of the reasons why that was a 1-point win for Maryland?
Tell me.
Because one of the shots they missed, Oklahoma State tipped into the Maryland baskets.
I mean, earlier we talked about the West Coast Conference, how good St. Mary's looks, and I would just like to point out what Maryland did to St. Mary's on November 17th. They crushed it.
David, that's the wrong St. Mary's. That's St. Mary's of Maryland.
I'm looking at the schedule, and it says St. Mary's.
Okay. David, now I'm going to skip you. I'm going to go to Stalika. The Northwestern Wildcats. 2 losses on the season, Notre Dame and Butler, a win over Texas, a win over Wake, a dominating win over a bad DePaul team. For real or a fraud?
I'm not going to say for real just yet because they also had the fortune of playing Texas in November, which we may or may not get to later. Texas had also bounced back against Alabama. But I also want to see what Northwestern does later this month against Dayton before I can really start to consider them for real.
Well, first they got to get past New Orleans, which won at Washington State, so you got to keep an eye on that. David, I will go to you next. Let's turn over to the Big 12 here. I want to keep things moving along. And how about, I hate to do this, how about the Kansas State Wildcats 7-1?
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Well, they lost to Maryland, didn't they?
They lost to Maryland, yes. They have beaten powers like Robert Morris, Hampton, and Omaha.
and Boston College, let's not forget that. I'm not a believer yet. I'm willing to keep an open mind, but again, what have they done other than win home bye games, win at St. Louis, although they clobbered St. Louis, but that's sort of like winning a home bye game, and then beating Boston College.
And John T., you are not high on first-year coaches. Over at Texas Tech, though, Chris Beard has this team out to a 7-1 start as well.
Fraud. I know their only losses by 2 points to Auburn neutral site. They're literally that close to being undefeated. Their best win is by 1 point at home over Rice. Fraud.
Fraud.
Did you see
Okay.
how they won that game? I mean, since you brought that up, Rice led pretty much the whole game, although it was very close. And then in the final seconds, they fouled a 3-point shooter with about 2 seconds to go. Texas Tech hits all 3 free throws. Oof.
Let's turn over to the Pac-12. Matt, let me bring you in here, and we'll go to the Pac-12. The Cal Golden Bears out to a 6-1 start with only the loss to San Diego State. Do we know enough yet?
I'm on the fraud alert there. I think actually on serious fraud alert. They escaped an OT against both La Tech and UC Irvine. I know the Irvine game they played pretty short-handed, but I don't like that roster. I think they lost too many pieces in the offseason that I don't think they replaced. And Ivan Rabb's really, really good. After that, Jabari Bird, I think, has kind of been star-crossed in that he's never been able to stay healthy, and he's pretty good when he's healthy. But on the whole fraud, I think bottom half of the Pac-12, and maybe they have 18 wins or something and squeak in the NIT, but I don't think much more than that.
Yeah, big game against Princeton tomorrow. Cal and Princeton, those are the 2 schools I got my degrees from.
Yeah, something like that. But I think it was Princeton of California, maybe. But Stalika, the Utah Utes out to a 5-1 start. Only 6 games played so far, including wins over the likes of Northwest Nazarene and Concordia of Oregon. You sold?
That's a huge F for fraud right there. Because when they played a team like Butler, they were exposed badly. And they may or may not be facing an angry Xavier team coming in on Saturday for their first true road game of the year.
David, over in the SEC, Bruce Pearl's got Auburn out to a 6-1 start here.
Yes.
Fraud or for real?
I am going to go out on a limb and say that I think they're for real. It's the best team he's had. It's the best team Auburn's had since he arrived there. It's probably the best teams Auburn's had since long before he arrived there. But they haven't done anything that really jumps out at you yet. But there's enough there to lead me to believe that they could be for real. Close win over a Texas Tech team that you just talked about, the only team to win there. Nice win at UAB, who isn't great, but it's still, I mean, that was sort of a showcase game for them. And to go in there and be able to win it is what you would expect a team that's for real to be able to do. It's, Purdue clobbered them, but other than that, they've been fairly solid. Not beating anyone great, but looking the way a team that's for real should look against Georgia State, Eastern Kentucky, Texas Tech, UAB. I think that based on the eye test, I think that they can be for real.
So from a historical standpoint, you're not counting the 1999 season where Auburn ended up having to vacate wins because of probation?
Well, they were good that year. They was it 03 they made the Sweet 16? I mean, Auburn's had some good.
That was 99. They were a number 1 seed. But
yeah.
If you look at that region, there were 3 teams that have had to vacate their seasons that year. Auburn, St. John's, and Ohio State.
Excellent.
Good job. All right, John T., I saw you shaking your head about Auburn, so I want to get your reaction to what David just told us about them.
As he said, their best win is by 2 points over a good record Texas Tech team that we all think is a fraud. They got destroyed by Purdue, which is nothing to be ashamed of, but it shows that they're not for real. I mean, they're going to – their next road game is at UConn Friday before Christmas. Can you look me in the eye and say that you're confident that they're going to win at UConn? Because I am not confident they're going to win at UConn.
I'm confident they'll beat Boston College.
One other team in the SEC I want to hit on here because we are starting to run a little late. But Matt, the Arkansas Razorbacks, 6-1 as well.
Yeah, I don't love that neutral court loss to Minnesota, and I think again I'm mostly built on cupcakes. That's a fraud to me. Like, if we're not talking about South Carolina with assuming Thornwell's back, and that's not Alonzo Trier mess up, Florida, Kentucky, and to a lesser extent Georgia, you're talking fraud to me. SEC still.
David, I want to quickly touch on a couple other conferences here. The Atlantic 10, we saw Rhode Island lose 2 games this week. We saw VCU lose a game. Dayton 5-2 so far.
Well, VCU didn't just lose. They did not mess around when it came to losing.
Yeah, it was 64-46 to Illinois. Is the Atlantic 10 a 1 or 2 bid league this year suddenly?
Potentially. I mean, Davidson's looking a little better than I thought they would, but they're not so much better to where I'd say they were inside the bubble. Dayton, I'd like to think they're going to get it together. I know that they're kind of beat up with injuries right now. I still think VCU can do it, but in Rhode Island being 5-3, now I know that they kind of had a bad week, and they're going to have time, and there's still room, but this might be a situation to where they get one team inside the bubble and that's it. That's their first place team. And the only way they get a second win in is if someone else wins the conference tournament. I think there's room for 2, Rhode Island and maybe Dayton, but it's not more than that. Because where are these, like we always say, you have to impress the committee at some point. And at what point is that going to happen for anybody in this league?
So you don't think Sacred Heart beating Fordham is going to impress the committee for the A-10?
No, I don't think that's going to impress anyone. But I do think Fordham will beat St. John's. That won't impress anyone either.
Matt, I want to ask you the same question about the American. Is this a 1 or 2 bid league this year? I know Cincinnati's looking really good, but beyond them, I mean, UConn finally bouncing back with the win tonight, but that's not enough to fix what they've done already so far this season, I don't think.
Yeah, SMU sort of, kind of has. I mean, they have the win over Pitt in that, but no, I'll say 2 bids because there's bids coming from somewhere. I mean, we all think the SEC is only about a 4-bid league. In that Big 10, 6 or 7. I mean, the Big 12 looks like they're going to put their usual metric ton in. The ACC will. Big East will probably put 5 or 6 in. But probably it's going to be spots where I'll say they get 2, but I'm not feeling more than that.
Well, I want to bring up the SMU team.
I really like in this league. Their margin for error is small, but I do like UCF. I think they could get in.
Yeah, I want to go back to SMU though. John T, I think you saw SMU at the 2K Classic. I think this team is very disappointing so far from what I've seen.
Yes, but they played a good Michigan team, I believe undefeated USC team. The loss at a bottom at a non-top 100 Boise team by 9 points is not good. They beat Pitt by single digits at the neutral site.
How about 49-43 win at home over Cal State Bakersfield?
Unimpressive from the offensive standpoint, impressive from the defensive standpoint. I think Temple is the second team in this league that's going to make it.
Okay.
And they're also going to have a big game coming up later this week when their friends on the other side of the Metroplex from TCU pay a visit to Moody Coliseum.
Let's quickly talk about the Mountain West. And now that we're done talking about the Mountain West, let's turn to the West Coast Conference.
What is wrong with the Mountain West? I mean, let's spend.
Okay, let's go ahead. Go ahead, David.
Is this the second year in a row they're unable to get their first place team inside the bubble? Right now, I'm looking. I've seen one team that I thought might be good enough to be inside the bubble, and that's Colorado State, who we talked about earlier. What has happened to this league? Like, this was a league that was better than the Pac-10 many, many years in a row. Like, when I say many, 3 or 4. What has happened? I mean,
yeah,
one of the coaches did move over, and that was Steve Alford. I mean, it was one of the reasons New Mexico was in the tournament for a number of years.
Yeah, John T., let me get your thoughts. I'd like to get your thoughts on this Mountain West Conference. San Diego State not looking that good. Nevada doing nothing very impressive. Colorado State with a home loss to Wichita. What is wrong out here?
I think just a little attrition over time, that they had some injuries. I know that Colorado State was supposed to be good. That's why I drafted Deion Clavel first in my fantasy draft and then saw him get arrested for falsely imprisoning his girlfriend. So that was kind of a blow to him his team and me, I wouldn't give up on Nevada yet. Their only losses to a great St. Mary's team on the road in the season opener and an Iona team who they beat at home and then lost at a neutral site. They face a below-average Washington team on the road this Sunday and 3 cupcakes before entering conference play. I think they have a good shot at being 11-2 entering conference play. And in this week conference, I think that means they can win 20 games. And I don't think they're a strong, two-bid league, but I wouldn't just throw them away. I think they have a shot.
Matt, over in the West Coast Conference, we've already spoken about Gonzaga and St. Mary's. BYU, very disappointing so far, including a home loss to Utah Valley that may have just written them off entirely. But we got a San Francisco team sitting here at 6-1. Do we need to start looking at them?
I'm not quite ready to go there yet, but hey, if they keep a decent record going into West Coast play and say they get one of Gonzaga or St. Mary's at home, maybe they start building that profile. I mean, we know Kyle Smith can coach him his time at Columbia, so that maybe I'm still probably not ready for the NCAA. Now, maybe if this were the NIT radar, I'd probably be looking at them more and then wondering, does BYU take their – it's feeling like their annual spot in the NIT now. I know they've made the tournament a bunch under Dave Rose, but this has looked like another disappointment for the Cougars.
Yeah, Cougars, the home loss to Utah Valley, they cannot afford another bad loss, and I don't think the team is good enough to avoid that. Let's take a quick look at some of the games coming up here the next week. I wanted to go through these quickly because we are almost out of time. But, David, tomorrow night, the Jimmy V Classic in New York City, Purdue, Arizona State in the first game. And when you decide to turn back into ESPN, about after you watch the first 5 minutes of that, you got Florida and Duke in a very interesting nightcap.
Yeah, real good game here, this Florida-Duke game. Mike White, the coach at Florida, his father is the athletic director at Duke and a member of our selection committee, so we'll be getting to know them in March. Or not our selection committee. See, we work so close with the
I thought he was joining us this year. I was getting a little excited there.
Sometimes I forget who's on ours and who's on the actual one. How close we work with. But, it's just interesting because Duke was supposed to play Louisiana Tech and then backed out of it. This one I don't think they're going to back out of. But when Mike White was the coach at Louisiana Tech. A good chance for a signature win for Florida.
Yeah, Stalika, another good game tomorrow night, Texas at Michigan.
Yeah, as we teased earlier, Texas was coming off a nice win over Alabama just as the schedule changed over to December. And you look at a team like Michigan, is this the team that dominated against Marquette and SMU, or is this the team that struggled against defensive-oriented teams like South Carolina and Virginia Tech? I mean, I can't imagine they're going to be able to do much better against Havoc, but I'd still give them the edge at home.
And John T., we have a 2-day event at Pearl Harbor and part of the honoring of the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. Coming up tomorrow night is Cal and Princeton play, followed by Hawaii and Seton Hall. Wednesday night is Cal and Seton Hall, followed by Hawaii and Princeton. That Cal-Seton Hall game, obviously the premier game of this event. How big of a game is that early this season for both those teams?
I have the Princeton folks on line one about their game against Cal being the premier game, but I'll leave them on hold. I think Seton Hall as a defending tourney team is solid. Cal is for real. Rab missed the first few games. He's back now. They have a freshman point guard in Charlie Moore, I believe his name is. They also have these 2 Eastern Conference, Eastern Coast teams going all the way across the world to get to Honolulu. So I think Cal's going to take care of business.
Right. A few other games of note here coming up on Wednesday includes the Grand Canyon Antelopes getting another big name in their house, San Diego State coming in, as well as Xavier, John Salika at Colorado following their game at Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, this one seems a little more on par with Xavier's game against Michigan because Michigan, I mean, we thought that was going to be a big game last year, but they turned out to be a team that was more bubble-ish. I mean, Colorado, I'm not that convinced they're going to get in the tournament this year, but that's still going to be another nice preparation going into Big East play for Xavier. That's one they should be able to pull out, but I also think Grand Canyon is going to pull out their other game against San Diego State at home.
Yeah, that's one that San Diego State kind of needs. It's odd to say that, but that is the kind of quality road win that San Diego State might need to get. And how pivotal is this for Colorado? I mean, I know they're going to have chances in the Big 12, but is there any – or Pac-12 – is there any sense of urgency here, do you think, Chad or anybody?
I think there is. I think Colorado really does need to get a scalp or two, and this will be a very big one at the end of the day for them. But I think Xavier coming off of the Baylor game is going to be ready for them, and I'll put it that way. And I think that Xavier pulls this game out. David, we've got a few in-state rivalries coming up here as well this week. We've got Creighton at Nebraska, we've got Davidson at North Carolina, and we've got Iowa State, Iowa. Any of those three stand out to you?
Iowa State, Iowa is all. I mean, since both teams kind of became relevant, although Iowa is lacking in that department this year, that game has been a show. It's not a conference game, but it might as well be. I mean, that is an intense atmosphere that's fun to watch just because of the level of hatred. Creighton's dominance over Nebraska will likely continue. It's all part of the plan. I mean, Tim Miles will crush the non-believers. It's all part of the plan. Don't worry about that. But I don't think they're going to get this win. And Davidson in North Carolina, it's interesting you would call that a rivalry.
I said in-state matchup.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I'm eagerly awaiting Greg McDermott upping his record against Tim Miles to 15-0 after that one.
Well, you know what that means. They've never played in the last 10 games of the season. Greg McDermott in his career is somewhere around 44% of his games in the last 10 games of the season. So I'm sticking by my prediction of Creighton. They will be amazing until the second half of Big East play.
Even Kyle Lamb would not be that delusional, and he's also a Tim Miles fan.
Yeah, I want to very quickly go through some of the games coming up this weekend here. Matt, we've got your Marquette is hosting Wisconsin in a very interesting game there that I think could be a really fun game, actually.
Yeah, that'll be the first Marquette game I'll be in the house for this year, and hoping for home. I know they went to Wisconsin and won last year. Kind of a tough matchup this year. I think it'll depend. Does Nigel Hayes realize he's a very good inside-out college player, or is he still trying to showcase his three for the NBA? Does Luke Fisher, Ethan Happ battle might say, and then I think Marquette's guards will give Wisconsin some issue with their quickness and ability to get into the lane, but then do they finish there or do they go out of control and turn it over? Interesting matchup. You know, Wisconsin actually put 90 up on Oklahoma, so they played a little faster. Will they play that, which would actually favor Marquette, or do they try to keep the game in the 60s or maybe low 70s, which would favor the Badgers?
Yeah, Matt, real quick question, and just real quick, Marquette, Wisconsin, what is the temperature of that? I know it's a big game, but is it a showcase game or is it a knockdown, drag-out hate fest?
More of the hate's probably quite honestly on the Marquette side, in that now where the programs are now, with Wisconsin unfortunately being really good and Marquette struggling the last few years, it was pretty hot in the mid-2000s when both were perennial tournament teams, and I think if Wojo gets Marquette back to that level, it will be pretty hot again where in-state rivalries. I know Wisconsin, they're probably already bitter on Bo not going hard after Sam Hauser. That's probably going to cost him the little brother Joey too to Marquette, and that might turn it up a little bit again if the Hauser brothers, who are Wisconsin-style players, become stars at Marquette.
John T., little Pac-12 here, a couple of big games involving Pac-12 teams coming up on Saturday. I'm not going to do Arizona at Missouri. I'm going to actually go to the big one here, Michigan at UCLA.
I was a lot more excited about this a couple of weeks ago when Michigan was looking good. Now I'm a little less excited. I also hope that you're not glossing over an undefeated Notre Dame, an undefeated Villanova at a defeated Newark, New Jersey Prudential Center. I think that's going to be the game of the week.
That was where I was going next. But, David, that's actually part of a doubleheader in Newark there. Villanova the night, Notre Dame the early game, and then the key game afterwards, Penn State and Pittsburgh.
Yes, two really good games here. Newark is just thrilled. It's the most exciting thing that's happened in Newark since people realized they were allowed to leave.
Hey, now, I've seen a game with Chad at the Prudential Center. It's not the slum that you make it out to be.
No, it's not that bad there. But, yeah, this Villanova-Notre Dame game is a huge one coming up. That's a Saturday noon game. A few other games coming up that I think we need to be circled on the calendar here include Oklahoma, Wichita State, Cincinnati, Butler, also Utah at Xavier, UConn at Ohio State, and And we've got Akron at Gonzaga, and David, another game that's could be a little interesting here.
Yeah, Akron, one of the better under-the-radar teams. I think they're swinging way over their head in this win. I mean, it is the kind of win that if they were to get, suddenly they're very much on the radar and probably inside the bubble. But it's not easy to win at Gonzaga. I've been following that program closely, and I have decided that it is not easy to win there.
One last game coming this week I do want to hit on. Matt, let me throw this one over to you. On Sunday, Florida's at Florida State.
That feels like a pretty big one. Like I like this Florida team a little bit more than I did coming into the year. They've been very good so far. They had the close loss to Gonzaga and Orlando, but this is a huge week for the Gators, where Duke got a neutral and then Florida State. I feel like they're gonna get one. I don't know if they get both. That'd be a real tough ask. If they do that, we're talking about Florida's a top 10 team. But like big week for them, and even Florida State. We mentioned nice total wins. Quality of wins is a different story. And so I think that's one where both kind of will want to have that in their resume come selection Sunday, and it might say which one of those teams is, say, like a 4 or 5 seed, which is maybe a 7 or 8.
Well, I guess on that note, Matt, let me stick with you for a second. Stick with you here, actually. I want to run through each of you any final thoughts on the evening and what we've discussed here tonight.
We actually were briefly mentioning it earlier, but outside of the top 6 leagues, it is looking barren for at-larges. I mean, I know WCC, they'll put Gonzaga and St. Mary's in. You figure Cincy's getting in from the American, but, man, the A-10 doesn't have a sure-turny team. The Valley will probably put Wichita in, but then I don't think they have any second hope. So if Wichita does their usual run through St. Louis, that's the 1-bid league. And then the Mountain West, man, the fall of the Mountain West to where what was regularly anywhere from like 3 to 5 bids is now really looking hard at consecutive years of being 1 bid.
Well, I would also keep eye out for Valpo over in the Horizon League if you want to talk about those teams. But again, it's only a 2-bid league if Valpo gets upset in their conference tournament. It's another team that's starting to get some votes in the top 25 as well. But Stalika, let me turn to you.
Matt also teased this earlier, but Sindarius Thornwell was suspended for South Carolina just prior to their win against FIU. I mean, this was handed out by the school, so we have no idea if it's going to be academics related or drug related. I just know Angry Frank wasn't answering any questions about it during his post-game press conference. They're going to have a critical game coming up at New York against Seton Hall as part of what I think is the Under Armour Classic, since both of those schools are Under Armour schools. We'll have to see how the Gamecocks do without Thornwell in their lineup for the foreseeable future.
Maybe he was refusing to wear Under Armour. Maybe that was the problem. But John T., let me turn to you.
So we mentioned Louisville's trip to the Lopes. I just wanted to give a shout-out to Dwayne Russell. In 40 minutes, the 155-pound senior scored 42 of his team's 70 points. I'm no math major. That sounds like 60% to me against one of the best teams in the nation in Louisville. My Wildcats will host Grand Canyon in 9 short nights. I'm praying that they can double-team Dwayne Russell. Otherwise, he's going to score another 42 in McHale.
David.
Something kind of odd happened on Saturday, and that's that we really like both Kentucky and Virginia. I think we think of them as being 1-2 seed caliber teams. Last year, the 8 teams that finished that earned the 1 and 2 seeds were a combined 122-6 at home. When you're talking about being that high on the seed list, you're talking about almost never losing at home. It was sort of kind of remarkable that if those teams are as good as we think they are, and I think that they are, that both of them would drop a game at home in the same day. So that was kind of exciting to see. And then secondly, I mean, I just don't think you understand the genius that goes into the work that I do with the brackets. I know it didn't make sense. I'd love to explain it to you, but we're almost out of time.
Well, I want to land on one thing, and I want to actually turn over to the women's game very briefly here, where Wednesday night, the UConn women's team is going to Notre Dame, number 2 at number 1, putting their 80, I believe it's up to 82 games, their win streak, closing in on their 90-game win streak record that they had a few years back. And when you look at a team like this, too, not only are they doing it, but if you look at it, this is now going to be the 6th or 7th top 15 team they've already played this season. They got a few more on the schedule. Maybe we should get team scheduling like this on the men's side, because it is insane what they do in the women's side. It seems like every time there is a women's game, it is 2 top 10 teams meeting out of conference. I don't know how they do it, but somehow they do it.
Now, there was another interesting graphic that showed up during the UConn-Syracuse game. UConn has beaten Notre Dame all 4 times during the past 4 years, but in that same time frame, Notre Dame has only lost 2 other games themselves.
Yeah,
remarkable.
And maybe at some point in the future, we should have a debate on whether or not what UConn does on the women's side is good for that game or not. But we're going to say that for another night. But for now, on behalf of myself, Chad Sherwood, and off to one side over here, John Salika, the other side, David Griggs, down there, Zukowski and John Titel. We do want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we'll talk to you again real soon.